You got dressed this morning like you always do. You found something nice to wear. You checked the mirror one more time before you picked up your keys, because you still care about showing up right. You still believe that matters. You drove to the same building you have driven to for years. Maybe 20 years. Maybe 35. You know that parking lot the way you know your own driveway. You found your spot. You gathered your Bible or your bag. You walked through those doors. You smiled at the greeter because that is who you are. You picked up the bulletin. You made your way down the aisle to the same seat you have been making your way to for longer than you can easily calculate. And somewhere between sitting down and hearing the first note of the first song, the feeling came back. That feeling. Not grief exactly, though it lives right next to grief. Not sadness exactly, though it wears something that looks like sadness when you catch it in the right light. Something quieter than both of those. Something that has been living in your chest for so long that you have mostly stopped trying to describe it to anyone, because every time you tried, the words came out sounding smaller than the actual thing, and the person listening looked at you with a polite confusion that told you they had not quite followed you there. You were surrounded by people. Hundreds of them, maybe. Families shuffling into rows the way families do, sorting themselves out, getting everyone settled. Young couples with babies balanced on their hips and toddlers who do not understand why they have to sit still today of all days. Teenagers doing their very best impression of not wanting to be there. Friends greeting friends across the aisle with the warm and easy shorthand of people who have had each other for years. The same faces you have been watching fill those seats for longer than some of those faces have been alive. And yet, you felt completely alone. Not the kind of alone that a friendly handshake during the greeting time can touch. Not the kind that gets better if someone happens to sit down beside you. This kind lives deeper than proximity. It does not care how many bodies are in the room. It walked through those front doors with you, found your seat, and settled right in for the whole service as if it had reserved the spot. If you know exactly what I am talking about tonight, I need you to stay with me. Because I believe this feeling has a name. I believe there is a reason it has followed you into this specific season of your life, into these specific Sunday mornings. And I believe that what I want to say to you tonight is something you were meant to hear before this week is over. You are not broken. You are not failing spiritually. You are not being punished for something you cannot identify. You are not imagining something that is not real. What you are feeling is as real as the wood of that pew beneath you, and it is far more common than anyone standing at a pulpit on Sunday morning tends to acknowledge out loud. Let me tell you what Sunday mornings can cost a person. For some of you, the cost is invisible to everyone around you. On the outside you look like a person who is managing well. You dress nicely and arrive on time and participate when participation is expected. You have learned to wear the face that gets you through the service, because that is what the situation calls for, and because you do not want to make anyone uncomfortable, and because some part of you keeps believing that if you just keep going through the motions, the feeling might eventually lift on its own. It has not lifted. And the fact that it has not gone away is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is evidence that you are carrying something real, something that deserves to be named and brought somewhere that can actually hold the weight of it. I want this to be that place tonight. There was a time when walking through those doors meant something different than it means now. There was a time when it felt like coming home in the truest sense of those words. Not because everything was perfect, not because the church was without its difficult seasons and its imperfect people and its committees that nobody could agree on, but because you had your people inside those walls. And your people made it home. You knew where to sit because that was where your group sat. You did not have to scan the room when you walked in. You walked toward a familiar cluster of faces that were already looking for you, that would shift over to make room without being asked, that would pass you a peppermint when the sermon ran long and grab your arm in the parking lot afterward because they had something to tell you and it could absolutely not wait until next Sunday. You prayed for each other without needing to make a formal request. You cried at the same funerals. You laughed at the same ridiculous things that happened at the Christmas pageant that one particular year, the one that none of you will ever completely stop laughing about. And then, slowly or suddenly depending on your story, the group got smaller. Nobody prepares you for that. Nobody sits you down and explains what it feels like when the people who made a place feel like home begin to disappear one by one, in the various ways that people disappear when life moves in the directions it tends to move. Someone relocated to be closer to her children, which you celebrated for her and quietly mourned for yourself at the same time, and you did not let her see the mourning because you did not want to make her feel guilty for doing the right thing. Someone got sick in ways that made Sunday mornings impossible. Someone died, and you sat in the pew you always shared and tried very hard not to look at the space where they used to be, and then you sat there again the Sunday after the funeral, and the Sunday after that, because sitting somewhere else would feel like an erasure of something you are not ready to erase. The group thinned. And the church kept going, which is what churches do. New families arrived and new programs started and the worship team changed and the style of the service shifted toward something that pointed, not unkindly but unmistakably, toward someone a generation younger than you. Everything the community was building started to assume a certain kind of person in the seats, and that person was not quite you anymore. And you adjusted, because that is who you are. You are adaptable and faithful and you care far more about the community thriving than about whether the music matches what you grew up singing. So you adjusted and you kept showing up and you told yourself it was fine, and mostly you believed it. But something quiet was growing on the inside. The loneliness was taking root in the way that things grow in dark places when no one is watching. And by the time you recognized it clearly, it had been there long enough that you could no longer remember what Sunday mornings had felt like before it arrived. Now let me tell you about the part of the Sunday service that nobody talks about enough. There is a moment, somewhere in the middle of the worship, when the pastor says something like, turn to someone near you and say good morning. Shake a hand. Give a hug. And the room fills with movement and sound, all this brief and earnest warmth going in every direction, a whole room trying to love each other for 90 seconds. And if you are the person I am describing tonight, that moment is one of the hardest moments of the whole service. Not because nobody says hello. Someone always says hello. A smile, a firm handshake, a hug from the person in front who has known you for years in the way you know someone you see on Sundays but not in the deeper way. It is warm enough while it is happening. It is friendly enough in the moment. But then everyone turns back to their people. And you turn back to your row. And the warmth evaporates almost as quickly as it came, and you are sitting there again with the stone in your chest, surrounded by people who mean well and who have their lives and who do not know what is happening underneath your surface, and you are wondering how a person can shake 20 hands in 2 minutes and still walk out of the building at the end of the service having not truly connected with a single one of them. That is a specific kind of lonely. It is the kind that has the shape of community around it without the substance of it. And it is more disorienting than plain aloneness, because plain aloneness at least does not pretend to be something else. Then there is the fellowship hour after the service. Some of you have stopped going to it. You walk out to the lobby and you look at the fellowship hall, at the noise and the clusters and the people who already have each other, and something in you quietly calculates the cost of standing there with a coffee cup waiting for someone to come talk to you. And the calculation keeps coming out the same way. So you smile at someone near the door and you slip out to the parking lot and you drive home and you tell yourself you were tired anyway. You were not just tired. You are protecting yourself from something that has happened enough times that you know exactly how it goes. And then there are the Sundays that are harder than the regular Sundays. Mother's Day is one of them. Mother's Day inside a church can hold a complicated kind of grief for a woman over 50. The service tells a story about mothers that assumes a certain shape to the relationship, a certain kind of warmth and proximity and reciprocity that not everyone in the room is living right now. Some of you are mothers whose children have drifted away over years of distance and silence and complicated histories that prayer has been working on for a long time. Some of you are mothers whose children are gone in ways too permanent to speak about in the fellowship hall. Some of you wanted children and the wanting never turned into the having, and every Mother's Day you sit in a pew listening to a sermon about something that has always felt just to the left of where you are standing. You smile through it. Because that is what you have learned to do. Christmas Eve is another one. Christmas Eve used to be the most beautiful night of the entire year. The candles and the carols and the particular feeling of sitting in that dim and glowing room knowing that what you were celebrating was real and ancient and larger than anything the darkness could contain. You loved Christmas Eve in a way that lived in your body, not just your mind. It was something you could feel in your chest the same way you can feel the cold. And at some point Christmas Eve became the night you are most tempted not to come at all. Because Christmas Eve was designed to be shared. It was made for the warmth of someone beside you in the car on the way there and someone beside you in the pew holding a candle and someone beside you in the car on the way home saying what a beautiful service that was. And when that someone is gone, the beauty of the service can become almost too sharp to sit next to. You still come. You have come every year even when the cost was high, even when you sat in the parking lot for a long time before you made yourself walk in. And the faithfulness it takes to keep showing up to a thing that used to feel like pure joy and now sometimes feels like grief wearing joy's clothes, that faithfulness is not invisible. It is being held somewhere safer than any building. The Easter Sundays too. The first Sunday of a new year when everyone else seems to be brimming with fresh starts and you are sitting with everything you have been carrying for months and none of it feels particularly new. The Anniversary Sundays. The Sundays that fall on days your body remembers even when your mind is trying to move past them. You come to all of them. That is not nothing. That is enormous. Let me tell you about a man who did everything right and then sat down under a tree and asked God to let him die. Elijah had just come through one of the most extraordinary moments of his entire ministry. He had stood in front of a crowd that wanted him silenced, and he had not moved an inch. He had called on God in front of everyone, and God had answered in a way that left no room for debate, no room for doubt, no room for the kind of polite uncertainty that people sometimes hide behind when they are not quite ready to be fully convinced. He had been bolder and more faithful in that single moment than most people ever manage to be in an entire lifetime of trying. And then he ran alone into the wilderness and sat down under a tree and told God he was done. He was not weak. He had not lost his faith. He was not being dramatic. He was at the end of himself in a way that happens to faithful people who pour themselves out completely and have nothing come back in. He was the kind of exhausted that builds up over years of doing the work of God while carrying most of it alone. And in that exhaustion he did not dress himself up for God. He said the rawest possible version of the truth. He said he had had enough, and he meant it. And what did God do? God did not show up with a lecture. God did not send a messenger with a list of everything Elijah had accomplished and a reminder that he had no right to feel what he was feeling. God did not tell him to try harder or pray more or count his blessings or remember that someone else always has it worse. God sent an angel who came and touched him on the shoulder with the gentleness of someone who actually understood what was happening, and said something that I think is one of the most tender sentences in all of Scripture. Get up and eat. Because the journey is too long for you. Not because you have been doing something wrong. Because the road is long. Because you are a person with a body and a heart that has limits, and you have been walking a very long road for a very long time, and that deserves to be acknowledged. The angel let him sleep. He came back a second time. He touched him again. He fed him again. Twice. As if once was not enough, as if God wanted to be certain that Elijah felt genuinely tended to as a human being before he said another word. And then God spoke. Not in the wind. Not in the earthquake. Not in the fire. In a still small voice. The kind you can only hear when you are quiet enough and close enough to the source to lean all the way in. I think about Elijah often when I think about what it feels like to be alone in a room full of believers. Because what God showed him in that wilderness is what he wants to show you right now. The feeling of aloneness is not proof that he has gone somewhere. Sometimes it is the very thing he uses to draw you into the quiet, the place with less noise and less performance and less of the keeping up with everything, because the still small voice simply cannot compete with all of that. He has things to say to you that require a certain kind of quiet. You have had quite a lot of quiet lately. Maybe he has been waiting for it. And then there is David. David wrote a line that does not often appear in Sunday morning bulletins because it does not sound polished enough for that setting. He described himself, in the middle of his life, as a man with no refuge, with no one who cares for his soul, with no one to his right or his left who pays him any attention. This was David. The one described as a man after God's own heart. The one who wrote some of the most breathtaking worship ever set to human words. And in the middle of his life, sitting in an actual cave, He wrote a prayer that was simply the honest truth with no packaging around it, no resolution at the end, no tidy verse to land on before he closed. He did not dress it up. He did not say, "But I know I am supposed to be grateful, so I will push this feeling down and get back to praising you properly." He said the thing. He wrote it down. He sent it up to God like a letter from someone who had stopped pretending, and God received it exactly as it was. That is what prayer actually does. It does not require you to arrive with everything resolved. It does not need the version of you that has already figured it out. It does not ask you to package the feeling before you bring it. You can bring the raw version. The real one. The one that does not sound like a testimony yet and might not for a while. The stone in the chest is a prayer. The Sunday afternoon quiet is a prayer. The fact that you keep coming back even when coming back costs you is a prayer that has been going up every single week for years, and He has received every one of them. Let me tell you about the woman who went to the well in the middle of the day. She did not go at the time when the other women went. She went alone, in the heat of the day, when no one else would be there. Because the crowd had become something that hurt more than the desert ever could. She knew what it was to live inside a community and feel completely outside of it. She knew what it was to be surrounded by people who knew your name and still feel like no one actually knew you. She was avoiding community because community had become too expensive. And Jesus did not wait for her to find her way to the right building at the right time in the right frame of mind. He went to the well. He went to the place she had retreated to. He sat down in the middle of her avoidance as if that was exactly where he had planned to be, and he asked her for water in a way that made her feel like she had something worth offering, which nobody had made her feel in a very long time. He started talking to her like her story mattered. Like he had come specifically for this one conversation and nothing else had a prior claim on his time. He told her things about herself that she had never told anyone, things that should have felt like exposure, like accusation, like the community's worst opinion of her being confirmed at last. And somehow they did not feel like any of those things. They felt like being known. There is a difference between being examined and being known, and it is one of the most important differences there is. Being examined leaves you feeling exposed. Being known, truly known, by someone who sees every part of you and does not flinch and does not pull back, that is what she felt sitting at that well. She felt seen in the way that heals something rather than wounds it. Jesus has always understood that difference, even when his house has not always followed his example on this particular point. He knows which well you have been going to. Now let me tell you about Naomi. Naomi lost her husband. She lost both of her sons in the same season of her life. She was living in a country that was not her home, surrounded by people who were not her people, and she told her daughters-in-law to go. She told them to leave her and go back to their own families and their own futures, because she could not see any version of what came next that included the three of them together. She had nothing left to give. She said as much, directly, to God. She said she had gone out full and come back empty. No performance in it. No trying to sound more faithful than she felt. She was a woman who had been through so much that the energy required to package it for someone else was simply gone. And in the middle of that emptiness, In a season that looked like the end of her story from every angle she could see, something was already moving in a direction she could not see yet. Ruth stayed. Not because she had to. Not because anyone expected her to. Ruth looked at a woman who said she had nothing left to offer and decided that was simply not the point. She said, "Where you go I will go, and where you live I will live, and your people will be my people." She chose to stay faithful to someone who could not see the purpose of it from where she was standing. And through that one relationship, that one person who refused to let her be invisible, Naomi found her way back. Not all at once. Not without more pain along the way. But back. To belonging. To purpose. To a place in the story that she could never have predicted from the bottom of that empty season. The community of belonging that you are looking for may not come in the shape you have been expecting. It may not look like the group that used to save you a seat. It may come through one person. Someone unexpected. Someone from a direction you have not been looking. It may start with something so small that you almost miss it as the beginning of something. But Naomi's story tells us something important. God does not stop moving in the lives of people who have concluded that their season of belonging is finished. He has not stopped moving in yours. Let me tell you about some people I want you to picture tonight. Picture a woman who has been in her church for 39 years. She was there when the pastor who stands up front now was still a boy running through those halls on his way to children's church. She taught Sunday school for 23 years. 23 years, which means there are grown adults in that congregation today, people with their own children in the children's wing, whose earliest memories of faith, the first felt sense that God was real and close and loved them personally, were formed in a room with this woman. Her voice. Her patience. The way she made old stories come alive for small people who were not sure yet if they believed any of it. She brings a thermos of coffee from home now. Not because the church coffee is bad. Because the fellowship hall has become something she watches from the outside. Something that feels designed for a season she is no longer in. So she slips in and finds her seat and holds her thermos and sings the words with a weight and a texture that you can only earn by having lived through things, by having stood in these same shoes and sung these same words while grief was happening and while fear was happening and while the slow erosion of a life's familiar shapes was happening. The hymns mean something different after decades. They carry things. After service she goes home and makes something small. She sits in a chair that has a particular shape to it now, a shape that years of a specific person made, and the afternoon is long, and she does not call it hard because that is not the kind of person she is, but hard is what it is. Picture a man who lost his wife 14 months ago. He has not missed a single Sunday since the funeral. Not one. He puts on the clothes and drives the same route and sits in the same seat 3 pews from the front on the right side, because that is where he always sat, because moving to a different seat would mean something he is not ready for it to mean. People in the congregation say he is doing remarkably well, and they mean it kindly, and they are basing it on the fact that he keeps showing up. He lets them think what they think. He has not told anyone in that building what Sunday afternoon feels like now. He would not know where to begin. And besides, People are kind, but they are busy in the way that people are when they have their own full lives and they have done their part in the early months and they trust that a man who keeps coming must be okay. He is faithful. Whether he is okay is a longer answer. Picture the grandmother who drove 40 minutes this morning. Not because her church is far. Because her children moved, as children do, to be closer to their own lives, and she stayed because this building is where she has been. Her grandchildren are growing up in a different church, a different city, with a different set of Sunday morning traditions. She knows their faces from photographs and from the visits that come 2 or 3 times a year. She prays for them every single morning without fail. She wonders, in the quiet, whether faith will find them. Whether they will remember her when they are old enough to remember. She does not say this to anyone because it sounds like self-pity, and she has never been a self-pity kind of person. But the wondering is there, underneath everything else, in the quiet. And then there is the caregiver. She has been taking care of someone she loves for years. Every day she gets up and pours herself out completely. The medications, the appointments, the moods, the fear that lives permanently in a house where someone you love is growing fragile in ways that cannot be reversed. She does this with a quiet grace that other people admire from the outside without quite seeing the cost of it from that angle. Sunday morning is the 1 hour that is supposed to be for her. She drives to the building alone because the person she always came with is no longer able to come. She sits in a service full of people who have no idea what her week looked like, who ask how she is doing and accept fine as the answer because they are kind, but they are also not quite sure how to hold the real answer if she were to give it. And then she drives back. She does not resent the people who do not know. She is too tired for resentment. But in that pew, she is invisible in a way that nobody intends and everybody contributes to without meaning to. These people are in your building tonight. Not as a metaphor. Literally. They are in pews near yours. They look fine from the outside. And every single one of them is carrying something that they have not found the words or the permission or the right person to say out loud yet. Here is what I want to tell you about what God sees when He looks at that building on a Sunday morning. He is not watching from the front of the room. He is not observing the service from the same angle as the person on the platform. He has never been a front-of-the-room kind of God, not when it comes to where His attention actually settles. He is moving through that space the way He has always moved, which is toward the places where the need is most real and the people are most quiet and the carrying is heaviest. He is in the back rows. He is in the seats near the door. He is beside the thermos, and he is 3 pews from the front on the right, and he is in the car that drove 40 minutes, and he is standing with the woman in the lobby who has been holding her coffee cup for 20 minutes hoping someone will come. He sees all of it. He knows your specific seat. He knows which side of the aisle and how many rows back. He knows you drove yourself this morning and that you almost did not come, that you sat in the parking lot for a minute before you made yourself get out. He knows you sang the words even on the mornings when they felt hollow, when you were singing them from the outside of them rather than from inside, going through the motions not because you are a hypocrite but because going through the motions is sometimes all faithfulness has left to offer on a given Sunday. He has not called that small. He has called it faithful. He is not far from you in that building. He is the most present thing in the room. More present than the person in the next seat, more present than the music, more present than whatever is happening at the front. And he moves specifically toward the people who feel most invisible, because that is who he has always moved toward, that is the consistent pattern of the entire story from beginning to end. He goes to the wells where people hide. He sits under the trees where people have given up. He finds the caves where people are being honest for the first time in months. He is in the back rows of every church in this country where a faithful person is sitting alone with a thermos and a weight and a faithfulness so quiet that nobody has thought to name it. He is there right now. There is a promise I want to give you, and I want you to hold it past tonight. It says that God makes a home for the isolated ones. That He leads the lonely into belonging. This is not God passively noticing the problem. This is God actively moving toward it, working in the direction of community for people who have been living outside of it. That is not an accident of phrasing. That is the character of a God who took it personally every time someone He made was left alone. That promise does not expire after 50. It does not get smaller the longer you have been waiting for it. It does not have a clause that excludes the widow or the woman with the thermos or the man who has not missed a Sunday in 14 months. The promise stands for exactly the person who feels most outside of it. Now, the waiting is real. I am not going to tell you otherwise. The waiting has weight. The waiting has cost. The Sunday afternoons that go long and quiet are real, and they deserve to be named as the hard thing that they are. I am not asking you to pretend they are not hard. I am asking you to consider that waiting and being forgotten are two different things. And you have not been forgotten. Not once. I want to give you something to carry into this week. Not a strategy. Not a set of steps. Something simpler than either of those. The next time you walk into that building, before the music starts and before anyone needs anything from you and before you put on the face that gets you through the service, stop for just one moment. Eyes open or closed, it does not matter. And say, in whatever words come naturally, or in no words at all, this. Here I am. I brought what I have. It is not much today. But I brought it here because I did not know where else to bring it. That is a complete prayer. That is actually one of the most honest prayers a person can pray. And He receives it before you finish saying it. You have been faithful in places where faithfulness was expensive. You have kept coming back to something that has not always made you feel as welcome as it should have. You have kept loving God through seasons when His house felt like a room you were not sure you still belonged in. You have kept dressing yourself up and walking through those doors and singing those songs even when you were singing them from the outside. None of that faithfulness has gone somewhere it was not received. Every bit of it has been seen. Every bit of it has been held. Every bit of it has been counted by someone who does not miss the quiet faithful acts, who does not overlook the small and costly things, who has never once confused invisible with unimportant. Let me pray with you right now. Heavenly Father, I am bringing to you tonight the people who got dressed this morning and drove themselves to that parking lot and walked through those doors and sat in their seats and sang their songs and went home alone. The ones who have been showing up faithfully in places that have not always been able to see them clearly. The ones who know what it is to feel the particular ache of being invisible inside a room full of people who love you. I am asking you to see them tonight in the way that only you can see a person. Not the way the lobby sees them, which is fine, present, doing okay. The way you see them, all the way down into the thing underneath the thing. The loneliness underneath the faithfulness. The grief underneath the smile. The Sunday afternoon quiet that follows them home every week and sits with them through the long middle of the days that nobody else is paying attention to. Lord, I am asking you to come to them the way you came to Elijah. Not with a lecture or a list of blessings they should be counting. With your presence. With food when the road is too long. With the still small voice that has never stopped speaking even when everything else has been too loud for it to get through. Let them hear it tonight in the quiet after they close this. Let them feel it next Sunday in the pew before the music begins. Let it find them in the ordinary moments of the coming week that nobody else knows, or the difficult ones, the Wednesday afternoon moments and the Saturday morning moments when the quiet has a particular sharpness to it. If someone watching tonight has been lifting a quiet prayer for a child who has walked away from faith, Lord, carry that prayer further than they can see it going. Let them know tonight that you have heard every single one of those prayers and not one of them has landed on an empty ceiling. For the woman who has given 39 years to a community that does not fully know her name, I am asking you to make yourself known to her tonight by the name you have been saying since before she was born. Let her feel tonight that she is seen by the only set of eyes that have never looked away. For the man 3 pews from the front who has not told anyone in that building what it costs him to sit in that seat, Lord, meet him in that specific place. Let him feel that the seat beside him is not as empty as it appears. For the grandmother driving 40 minutes and praying for grandchildren she does not see enough, carry those prayers. Let her know that her faithfulness is not lost on you, that the faith she built in her children and is praying into her grandchildren is woven into something larger than she can see from where she is standing. For the caregiver who showed up today with nothing left and gave what she did not have, meet her where nobody else has thought to look. Be the one who takes care of the person who takes care of everyone else when no one else thinks to. And Father, for every person watching tonight who has been sitting in a full room and feeling like a ghost, I am calling on the promise that you make a home for the lonely. I am asking you to move in the direction of that promise in their specific lives, in the week ahead of them, in ways that are particular and personal and not just general. Let them not be invisible. Let them be found. Lord, for all the years of faithfulness that went uncelebrated, the Sunday school lessons that shaped people who never came back to say thank you, the casseroles that arrived at just the right moment, the prayers spoken quietly over a congregation that never knew someone was praying them, the committees and the late nights and the showing up when showing up had nothing left to give. I want to say on their behalf what they may not be able to say for themselves. It was enough. It was more than enough. The kingdom does not lose what faithful hands give to it. Every single thing they offered in the years when they were seen and in the years when they were not, it went somewhere. It is woven into something larger and longer than any of us can see from the inside of our particular Sunday mornings. Hold them through this week. Hold them through the Sunday morning that is coming. Hold them especially in the Sunday afternoon that follows it, which is the hardest hour. Remind them in small and specific and unmistakable ways that they are not forgotten, that the still small voice has not gone quiet, that the journey is long but you are walking it with them, and that the one who calls them by name has not once looked away. In the mighty and precious name of Jesus Christ, we pray. Amen. If something in this touched a place that you have not let anything touch in a while, you are not alone in that. There are people watching this right now who have been sitting with that same stone in the same chest, and they would understand every word of what you would say if you had a safe place to say it. This can be that place. If you want to leave what is on your heart here in the comments tonight, you might find that someone else needed to read it as much as you needed to write it. That is something that happens when people stop performing and start being honest with each other. And if someone you love came to mind tonight, if a face appeared while I was talking and stayed there, sometimes the most faithful thing one person can do for another is simply reach out and say, "I heard something tonight and I thought of you." You do not need the right words. You do not need to have it figured out. Just the fact that you thought of them. Just the fact that they were not invisible to you. He sees you in that pew. He has always seen you in that pew. He is not done with what he is doing in your life. Not even close. Not even on the longest and most silent Sunday afternoons when the week stretches out ahead of you and the house is very quiet and it feels like the story has run out of things to say. He has more to say. He has been saving some of it for exactly this season. And he will say it in a still small voice, in the quiet you have been given, in the place you least expect it. Keep listening. And if you have been carrying the guilt of the Sundays you did not make it in, the mornings you sat in the driveway and drove home without going through the door, I want you to put that down tonight. He was not marking you absent. He was watching you sit in that parking lot and he knew exactly what the morning had cost you just to get that far. That is not failure. That is a person doing the best they can with what they have on a particular morning, and he has never confused those two things. The door is still open. It will be open next Sunday too. And whatever you bring through it, whether it is your whole heart or just the part that still has something left, he will receive it. He always has. He always will. That has been the single most consistent thing about him across every season of your life, the way he keeps receiving what you bring without requiring you to bring more than you actually have. That is not going to change. Not because of which Sunday you missed. Not because of how long the quiet has been. Not because of how much smaller your group has gotten or how many pews are empty or how many names are in that cemetery you pass on your way to the parking lot. He is the God of the full room and the empty room. He is the God of the good Sunday and the Sunday you almost did not come. He is the God of the woman with the thermos and the man with the empty seat and the grandmother driving 40 minutes and the caregiver running on nothing. He is your God. And he has been sitting beside you in that pew this whole time. You were never as alone as it felt.